Okay, welcome to the second hearing of the Public Accountability Committee's inquiry into the appointment of Mr John Barilaro as Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner to the Americas. The inquiry is examining the circumstances leading up to the appointment, including the processes and probity and integrity measures that were undertaken. I acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians on the lands on which we are meeting today. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal people and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of New South Wales. I also acknowledge and pay my respects to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. Before we commence, I'd like to make some brief comments about the recent unauthorised disclosure of evidence that was given in camera and confidential to the committee and which unfortunately appeared on the front page of the Australian newspaper on Thursday, the 7th of July. The disclosure of in-camera evidence is a very serious matter for a committee as it can constitute a contempt of Parliament. Unauthorised disclosure of committee information may result in damage to individual participants in committee inquiries, the integrity of the committee system and the public interest. It can also jeopardise witnesses and others who provide confidential information to committees by exposing them to the risk of reprisals or other forms of adverse treatment as a result of giving evidence, deterring future witnesses from giving confidential evidence to committees. It undermines the relationship of trust between members of the committee, which is necessary for committees to function effectively, and lowering public confidence in the committee system and the Parliament generally. The committee has begun its investigations into the disclosure and apologises to those who have been unfairly affected or involved. I would also like to make some brief comments about the procedures for today's hearing. Today's hearing is being broadcast live via the Parliament's website. A transcript of today's hearing will be placed on the committee's website when it becomes available. In accordance with the broadcasting guidelines, media representatives are reminded that they must take responsibility for what they publish about the committee's proceedings. While parliamentary privilege applies to witnesses giving evidence today, it does not apply to what witnesses say outside of their evidence at the hearing. I therefore urge witnesses to be careful about comments you may make to the media or to others after you complete your evidence. Committee hearings are not intended to provide a forum for people to make adverse reflections about others under the protection of parliamentary privilege. In that regard, it's important that witnesses focus on the issues raised by the inquiry terms of reference and avoid naming individuals unnecessarily. All witnesses have a right to procedural fairness according to the Procedural Fairness Resolution adopted by the House in 2018. If witnesses are unable to answer a question today and want more time to respond, you can take a question on notice. Written answers to questions taken on notice are to be provided within 21 days. If witnesses wish to hand up documents, you should do so through the committee staff. And in terms of the audibility of the hearing today, which you've already done, please speak into the microphone. For those with hearing difficulties who are present in the room today, please note that the room is fitted with induction loops compatible with hearing aid systems that have telecoil receivers. Finally, could everyone please turn their mobile phones to silent for the duration of the hearing. Today, we'll be hearing from one witness, Ms Jenny West, who was the former Deputy Secretary of Trade and International and Investment New South Wales. I thank Ms West for making time to give evidence to this inquiry. Ms West, could you please state your full name and position title and swear either an oath or an affirmation, please?
Jennifer Mary West, former Deputy Secretary of Trade and International with Investment New South Wales. I swear that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Thank you very much. Now, I understand you have an opening statement for the committee.
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm here today at the committee's request. I have never spoken publicly about this matter. For the sake of my family and their privacy, I have been trying to move on from what has been a very disappointing episode in my life. I hope my evidence today can help the committee understand the facts of this matter. In that respect, I am happy to assist where I can. I commenced as the Deputy Secretary, Trade and International in New South Wales Treasury in October 2020. Prior to that, I had worked as the General Manager, Trade and Investment, Digital Innovation at Austrade for 18 months. I moved into the public sector after more than 20 years in the private sector, in the banking and services industry, including leadership roles in Diageo, Telstra and Westpac, amongst others. In March 2021, I moved into Investment New South Wales, an agency within the Department of Premier and Cabinet. I remained Deputy Secretary, Trade and International. I reported directly to Amy Brown, who had then been appointed as CEO. On 12th of May 2021, with the support of Ms Brown, I applied for the Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner role for the Americas. I sent a cover letter of my CV to NGS Global, the external recruitment agency. On 21st of July 2021, I appeared before the interview panel comprising Ms Brown, Mr Jim Betts, the incoming Secretary for the Department of Premier and Cabinet, an independent panel member, and Dr Marianne Broadbent of NGS Global. On 12th of August 2021, Ms Brown told me I was the successful candidate. She sent me a briefing signed by Premier Berejiklian, noting my appointment as Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner for the Americas. On 14th of August 2021, Ms Brown approved my request regarding my contract terms. I was so excited about the appointment. I immediately shared the news with my family and friends. They were so happy for me. I began taking steps to relocate and had engaged a relocation company. I looked at rental accommodation in New York and researched colleges for my family. I thought I would be starting the new role in a matter of weeks, and I wanted to have my affairs in order. Over the next 4 weeks, I followed up on my written contract with Human Resources and Legal. I was told that there was delays as Investment New South Wales was awaiting US taxation advice. On 16th of September 2021, Ms Brown requested an in-person meeting the following day. In that meeting, she told me that there was a submission going up to Cabinet requesting that the Senior Trade Commissioner roles would become political appointments and not public sector appointments. Ms Brown indicated that this meant my America's Trade Commissioner role would be on hold. Ms Brown then also told me at that meeting that the funding for my current position, the Deputy Secretary position, within Investment New South Wales, had been reallocated, and I may not have that position either. That news shocked me. On 18th of September 2021, Ms Brown emailed me advising that any contract for me in the Senior Trade Commissioner Americas role would have to await the outcome of the Cabinet decision. On 27th of September 2021, Ms Brown told me that Cabinet had endorsed the request for Senior Trade Commissioner roles to become political appointments. In the space of 4 weeks, I went from having been appointed to the role of the Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner for the Americas to potentially not having a job. I felt so confused by what Ms Brown had told me. On October the 11th, I emailed my one-up manager, Mr Michael Coutts-Trotter, the Secretary of Department of Premier and Cabinet. I asked Mr Coutts-Trotter for a 15-minute meeting to explain my situation. I did not receive a response from him. The next I heard from him was by way of a formal letter terminating my employment 1 month later. On 14th of October 2021, I had a Teams meeting with Ms Brown at her request. She told me that I would not be getting the Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner role for the Americas. Ms Brown said that the position, and this is a quote, will be a present for someone. She added, and I again quote, "You are an extraordinary performer, and I am upset that this has happened." On 19th November 2021, I received a letter terminating my employment, effective from close of business 30th of November. This was clearly not how I'd expected my public sector career to end. Until the events of last year, I thoroughly enjoyed my time in the federal and New South Wales public sectors. And I believe I achieved my goal of making a difference alongside many other hard-working and dedicated public servants who shared my values and integrity. Until Ms Brown's in-camera evidence before this inquiry on 29th of June 2021, I have never been told that my appointment to the Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner's Americas role had been withdrawn because of concerns about my professional experience or performance. I had received no explanation from Ms Brown or Investment New South Wales other than what I have outlined today. I am genuinely surprised by the matters raised now by Ms Brown in her evidence before this inquiry. Given those matters have now been made public, I believe I should be given an opportunity to respond to them, especially because many of those things said are inaccurate or even false. I understand Ms Brown gave evidence to this committee that she now thought me unsuitable for the appointment. This suggestion is contrary to my selection by an independent committee following a competitive process and contrary to what Ms Brown told me at the time of my appointment. During my employment in New South Wales Government, I have never received any negative feedback about my performance. The feedback I had received was positive. This included Ms Brown's support for me to apply for the position of Trade Commissioner for the Americas and a performance review at New South Wales Treasury. Ms Brown's suggestion that there were discrepancies in my curriculum vitae is false. My CV was given to an independent panel well ahead of the selection process. It was independently checked and vetted by an agency which has the skills to do so. The results of that vetting was part of the process which resulted in my selection. I stand by my CV. Ms Brown says, after she told me I was not getting the Trade Commissioner role for the Americas, the relationship between us and between me and Investment New South Wales deteriorated somewhat, and I was absent from work without explanation. This is untrue. The period to which she refers was a period during which I took sick leave and provided the appropriate medical certificates to justify the same. Ms. Brown suggested that I had taken time away from work or misused resources by travelling when there was no need to do so, and going so far to imply I was doing it for personal reasons. That is false. Ms. Brown gave no details as to dates, and I categorically deny such an allegation. Ms. Brown suggested that I had concealed my diary. That is untrue. My diary was always available for inspection. My diary was open, and my executive assistant had open access to it. I noticed that Ms. Brown also suggested that I had mischaracterised some exchange between an unnamed person at Investment New South Wales and a prominent businessman. Like that prominent businessman, I have no idea what Ms. Brown is talking about. When I read Ms. Brown's evidence, I was very disappointed. Until this time, I believed that we had a good relationship. As I have set out, much of what Ms. Brown has said is simply untrue. Had she contacted me, I could have corrected her. She did not contact me. I now look at that evidence, combined with the fact that it seems to involve an investigation after the Senior Trade Commissioner America's role had been withdrawn, with dismay. I hope this opening statement has been of some assistance. I would request a copy of this statement to be tabled. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. West. Yes, we'll get that opening statement tabled and distributed to committee members, please. We'll begin with questions from the opposition. Ms.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry?
I was just going to invite the witness to table the documents too.
Sorry, the whole... Yeah,
Are you happy to table the documents?
Yes, I am.
Yes, so they have been tabled as well and distributed to committee members. Thank you. Questions from the opposition, Mr. Mookie.
Thank you, Ms. West, for your appearance today and for joining us as well. Thank you, and also thank you for preparing an opening statement. I might just take you to some of the key events that you mentioned in your opening statement, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Can I just confirm again that you were offered the position on 12 August 2021 of Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner Americas?
Yes, I was.
Yes. And from 12 August 2021 to circa 16 September 2021, you were in effect involved in negotiating the terms of your appointment?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes. And then on 16 September is the first in a conversation. Was it a conversation with Ms. Brown? Was it an in-person meeting with Ms. Brown? She tells you that the submission is going up to Cabinet and requesting that the Senior Trade Commissioner roles to become political appointments and not public sector appointments. That's correct?
Sorry, what date was that again? Sorry.
16 September. I'm just at paragraph 10 of your statement.
Yes, on the 16th of September, she texted me requesting a meeting the next day.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and in that meeting, which took place on the 17th, she told you that there was a submission going to Cabinet converting these into political appointments?
Yes, that's correct.
At that point, did she indicate to you who was bringing that submission to Cabinet?
She did, but that would be Cabinet in confidence.
Okay. Did she sent you an email on 18th September 2021, correct, advising you that the position would now have to await the outcome of Cabinet?
Yes, that is correct.
And that email is produced in your documents, is it not?
Yes, it is.
I'm just going to... Do you mind opening that document? I think you'll find us towards the back.
Sorry, I'm trying to find the page.
It follows the handwritten file note that's photocopied. You're looking for it. So it's immediately after that. Perhaps I might read it to you.
Apologies, yes,
That's
sorry,
okay.
my filings.
Can I just read you the key part
Yes.
from it? This is what Ms Brown says to you. Given the Deputy Premier has now formally lodged a submission to Cabinet, which would, if approved, affect Investment New South Wales delegation in relation to the appointment of all senior trade and investment commissioner roles, I won't be able to proceed with the finalisation of your contract until I'm aware of the Cabinet's decision.
Yes, that's correct.
So I think we can infer from that that, according to this email, it was the Deputy Premier who brought the submission to Cabinet. That's correct. That's at least what you were told.
That is what I've been told.
Fair enough. On 27 September, Ms Brown tells you that the Cabinet has acceded to the Deputy Premier's request to convert these into political appointments. That's clear?
Yes, correct.
Can we just now turn to the events of 14 October? You have a Teams meeting with Ms Brown at her request, is that right?
Yes, correct.
And that Teams meeting is when Ms Brown says that this position, and this is a quote, will be a present for someone. Yes. That is
yes.
your best recollection of that conversation?
Yes, that is.
And was that Teams meeting recorded by any chance? Are you aware?
No, what I tend to do in any meetings that I have is I take notes so that I can do follow-up actions afterwards. And given this was an important meeting, I was taking notes during the Teams meeting.
Okay, and you have provided an email in which I think this conversation is documented, have you not? You've
Yes.
provided that email?
Yes, I have.
And I think I've got that in front of me. This seems to be an email that you've sent to, I presume, people at a law firm, which I'm only inferring from the email address. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And were these your lawyers at the time?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. And this is, do you recall, the Teams meeting that you, according to this email, it takes place at 5:15 p.m. on the 14th of October 2021? Is that?
Yes, correct.
And you sent this email at 5:35?
Yes, straight after it.
So you wrote this immediately after you heard Ms Brown say that this will be a present for someone. You immediately emailed your lawyers?
Yes, I did.
And you documented the call?
Yes, I did.
Can I take you to page, I think it's identified as page 2 of the email, or at least the second page of the email. Can you just read the first paragraph, please, for me?
I have spoken to Minister Ayres, who is
Sorry, can you, just from the start.
Okay.
Amy. I think. Yeah.
Amy. I have spoken to Minister Ayres, who has taken over the Deputy Premier's portfolio, and he has confirmed that you will not be getting the Americas role. It will be a present for someone. There will not be a role in New York for you. It has also been decided, given the other Band 3s around the world, we will not be having a Deputy Secretary Trade and International onshore, so the role won't exist in the new structure.
Thank you.
And just on that point, that role that's being referred to is your job?
Yes.
The one you were performing at the time?
So the job I was performing at the time. So on the same day, I got informed that the Senior Trade Investment Commissioner's role that I had been offered would not be going ahead. On that same day, at the same time, I was also told that my existing role would no longer exist.
And you were told it was a present for someone in the span of the same conversation?
Yes, I was.
Ms West, how did that... what was your reaction when you were told?
I was shocked. As I said previously, I went in 4 weeks from getting ready with my family to go overseas for 3 years to being told I wouldn't have a job.
And just on that, I just want to unpack, I guess, each of the aspects that were related to you on this Teams meeting that's documented in this email to your lawyer that you wrote 20 minutes afterwards. Just to confirm, your clear recollection was Miss Brown saying to you, I have spoken to Minister Ayres, who has taken over the Deputy Premier's portfolio, and he has confirmed you will not be getting the Americas role.
Yes, that's my clear recollection.
Did you at that point think the decision not to appoint you to the Americas role was Miss Brown's, Minister Ayres, or both?
I'm not sure on that.
But it's clear that in relating this decision to you, Miss Brown was referring to a conversation that she had had with Minister Ayres.
Correct.
Did she ever identify when that conversation took place?
No.
She's told us that she met with Minister Ayres sometime between the 5th and the 8th of October upon him getting the portfolio. So it's quite possible that it might have been that conversation, I guess, is from our view, but she shed no light as to whether it was that or there was a second conversation.
I can't comment on that. I don't know.
And just to be clear here, when she said it will be a present for someone, what did you think that meant?
I just thought it was an unusual turn of phrase, so I took notes of it.
Have you ever heard a person in the public service describe a job as a present for someone?
I can't comment on.
But it's unusual. That's not
I just
common.
thought it was an unusual term of phrase, yes.
Right. And then equally, at this point is when she expresses a view that your existing position that you had been performing, at least at that point, for 6 months?
For over a year.
For over a year would be terminated.
Correct.
In the same conversation.
Yes.
At that point, did she raise any concerns about your performance?
No concerns about my performance were ever raised until the in-camera evidence that she raised last week.
And then your appointment was terminated on the 19th of November, effective from the 30th of November, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And were you terminated under Section 41 of the Government Sector Employment Act?
Yes, that is correct.
And that is the section of the Act that says termination for no cause?
Yes, correct.
And as a result of you being terminated for no cause, did you receive your statutory entitlement under that Act?
Yes, all I received was my statutory 38 weeks, and I received no further compensation for anything.
But to be clear here, you weren't terminated for cause and that payment wasn't withheld.
No.
At that point, did Miss Brown indicate to you that she was launching an investigation into your conduct?
No, she did not.
At that point, did she suggest to you that she would be making inquiries into your CV?
No, she did not.
At that point, did she suggest to you that she'd be making inquiries into your education?
No, she did not.
When was the first time you learnt that you were subject to an investigation into your CV, into your education and your other career history?
Last week when she raised it in the in-camera evidence.
And this investigation took place at the same time you were already effectively notified that there was a likelihood that you were to be terminated?
Sorry, repeat that question again.
So this investigation, according to Miss Brown, took place sometime after October 1, I think, according to Miss Brown's evidence, but at no point were you notified at all?
No, I have at no stage have at any time in my career in New South Wales Government have I been told that I was underperforming, had any conversations about that. In fact, I was told on numerous occasions by Miss Brown that I was a good performer. She'd encouraged me to apply for the Stick Americas role. I believed until the in-camera evidence last week that we had a very good relationship.
And could you just go back to that email,
Yes.
to that last line of the email before that meeting ends, and just read out that last line as well to that point?
Amy, yes, of course. You are an extraordinary performer, and I am upset that this has happened.
Thank you.
And Ms. West, when you found out last week that you were subject to this investigation, how did you react?
I was shocked, to be honest, because before that evidence came out from Miss Brown, I thought we had a very good relationship. We had a very good professional relationship. We worked very closely together for over 8 months. We had a very complementary skill set. She had a very strong domestic government background. I had a very strong international government and cross-industry background. So we complemented each other and we worked very closely for 8 months. And on numerous occasions, she told me that she loved having me as part of the team, and I never had any negative performance-related issues raised with me.
Ms West, one of the suggestions in front of this committee is that the investigation which took place after the job was withdrawn, the offer of the Americas position was withdrawn from you, and now clearly after you were notified that you were to be made redundant. One of the suggestions in front of the committee is that such a campaign or investigation was launched in effect to retrospectively justify a decision to remove you. Do you have anything you'd like to say to the committee about that?
I can't comment on that. You'd need to ask Amy Brown.
Sure. Can I just go back to the very first part about how you were chosen for this role?
Mm-hmm.
You say earlier in your statement that Ms Brown encouraged you, or you had the support to apply for this role?
Yes, that is correct.
And how did she express that support?
I mentioned to her that I was, given that I'd been in my DepSec trade and international role and helped set things up, that I felt that I could continue the good work that I was doing over in the Americas, and she thought it was a great idea and said, I think that's fantastic. And she even said that with my knowledge of federal government, New South Wales government as well, I would also be able to help the other sticks given that were new in from the private sector with my government background. So she actively encouraged me to take that role.
And then you did put an application in, did you not?
Yes, I did. I put in a formal application via NGS Global, the independent recruiter.
And then they presumably shortlisted you?
Yes, I went through an initial interview with the recruitment company. I was then shortlisted for, as per New South Wales public sector guidelines, an independent panel. And I went through and...
We'll get to that, Ms West.
Yeah, okay.
But just to be clear here, you were, to the best of your knowledge, you were following the same process as every other applicant?
Yes, I was.
And you had no idea how many people had applied for the role?
No, I did not.
And this was all being run by NGS Global externally from Investment New South Wales?
Yes, correct.
Great. And then they then shortlist you and recommend you for an interview with the panel, which takes place on 21 July 2021, is that correct? And that panel comprised of the then incoming Secretary of the Department of Premier and Cabinet, did it not?
Yes, it did.
And that had already, Mr Bett's appointment to that role had already been announced at that point. And so you thought you were appearing before the next head of the public service.
Yes, I did.
And you prepared accordingly, did you not?
Yes, I did.
And then equally there was an independent panel member.
Yes.
Was that the Honourable, I think it's Warwick Smith?
Yes, correct.
And then equally, it was the Dr. Broadband of NGS who was running the recruitment process, correct? And did they question you?
Yes, they did. I went through a lengthy interview process, and it was on a range of different capabilities that they did the interview on.
And you emerged, did you not, as the preferred candidate?
Yes, I did. I was told I was the preferred candidate, and Amy called me and sent me a text to congratulate me on the role.
And was that the idea that you were the preferred candidate was conveyed to you by Amy Brown?
Yes, it was.
Was it conveyed to you in any other way?
No, she sent me a text message saying, congratulations, this is one to frame. And she had a emoji of a Statue of Liberty and a champagne bottle. And she attached Gladys Beck, the Premier's signed off briefing note of my appointment to the Senior Trade Commissioner's role for the Americas.
Which is somewhere in this document.
Yeah, and you're aware too that other ministers signed off on the role as well?
I heard that through...
Treasurer at the time, Mr Perrottet?
My understanding is that they were all briefed.
Yeah.
Just to be very clear here, you're sent the briefing note in which Premier Berejiklian notes your appointment to the role.
Yes, I was.
So Ms Berejiklian is told you're appointed to the role before you are, because she presumably signed a briefing note before you're told.
Yes, correct.
That briefing note was signed on the 12th of the 8th of 2021, just for the record.
So Premier Berejiklian had literally signed the briefing note that day before you're told.
Yes, correct.
And I can only presume that when you were offered this job with a signed and briefing note from the Premier of New South Wales, at this point he's also managing a lockdown, that you may have been pleased.
Yes, I was, and I phoned my family to let them know the news.
Yeah. And then thereafter, you go through the process of negotiating the contract terms,
Yes.
and that wasn't particularly difficult. it
No,
doesn't
that
seem.
was in 2 days' time. It was done within... I sent a follow-up email to Amy following that on the... And by the 13th of the 8th, I had the contract terms finalised. So 1 day later,
Yeah.
I met Miss Brown.
Can I... Ms West, do you think you were treated fairly in this process?
I was surprised with how the process had been done. I thought the process was unusual because it was a proper public sector process. I went for a job, I applied for it, I got offered the role, and then to have that role withdrawn, and then to be told that it was going to be a political appointment, not a public sector appointment. I couldn't get my head around how a process could be stopped midway, and then to be told that I'd lost my existing job. So to be honest, I couldn't get my head around that.
What do you think it meant when you were told that this was going to be a present for someone else?
I just thought that terminology was unusual.
Ms Brown, sorry, Ms West, have it. At any point, did you consider reapplying for the role when it was offered a second time?
I would have reapplied for the role, but I couldn't. And the reason that I couldn't reapply for the role is that people may not know that if you've actually been made redundant, you can't reapply for a role in the public service for 9 months. And I did not believe that I would be able to reapply for the role because it was a political appointment and not a public sector appointment.
So just to be clear, though, you lost your job on the day you were told you didn't have that role, but by losing it in the way that you did, it prevented you from being able to apply in the future.
Yes, correct.
It would just indulge.
Thank you.
Can I just ask one question to close the line?
If it's closing that, yes.
Thank you,
Not a
Jane.
new line of inquiry.
Just my final question before we hand the time, Ms West, is it not the case that there currently is a Deputy Secretary, Trade and International, Investment New South Wales, and someone immediately moved in to fill your position that you apparently made redundant from?
I actually saw on LinkedIn 1 month ago there was a Managing Director Trade and Investment role advertised on LinkedIn, and it was a Band 3 role and not a Band 2 role.
So in effect, you were made redundant, and then somehow a job very similar to yours was advertised just some months later.
That is my understanding.
Okay. All right. So, Ms West, how did you feel when you heard that the role had been given ultimately to John Barilaro?
I was disappointed when I was told that it was going to be a public sector rather than I was disappointed when I was told that they were going to be political appointments rather than public sector appointments, because I had a very strong vision and objectives around what I wanted to achieve in the Americas on behalf of the people and businesses of New South Wales. So that was the main reason for my disappointment. But I did accept that they would be political appointments, and so when Mr Barilaro was appointed, I just assumed that was a political appointment.
Were you surprised that the position when Ms. Brown said it was a present for someone, were you surprised then when you heard ultimately that it was John Barilaro who got that present?
I really just, I had moved on at that stage, and I just assumed it was because it was a political appointment, and that's who they had chosen and felt was right.
Did you actually meet with any ministers once you had been offered the role in the first instance? Had you discussed or met with any ministers regarding your potential appointment? Or was it just all through Ms. Brown?
It was all through Miss Brown.
Okay. Can I just go back to the meeting that you had in person with Ms. Brown on the 17th of September, where she raised with you the fact that there is a separate submission to Cabinet to make the Senior Trade and Investment Commission roles political and not public sector appointments. Was there any discussion at that time by Ms. Brown with you about your current the position you are currently in, the Deputy Secretary position, when Ms. Brown spoke to you on the 17th of September about the stick role?
Yes, the discussion we had then was that she said that she may be using some of the funding from my role to fund other roles.
That was then, and was it at that point that the relationship potentially deteriorated between the two of you and it was good before then? Would that be?
I wouldn't say that the relationship had even deteriorated then. I had always got on very well with Miss Brown, and we had a very open relationship and good conversations. I understood the fact that they were moving from public sector to political appointments, and I accepted that is part of being in the public service. I was trying to get my head around why my Deputy Secretary role was being made redundant, because I was in the middle of some very large programs of work on behalf of the people and businesses of New South Wales, and I felt that I had a lot more to offer and a lot more work to do.
Thank you. Why was it back in, there's an email back in on the 31st of May 2021, and it's it says that your executive assistant sent an email listing, and this was to Tim Reid and Warwick Smith, Amy Brown and Jenny West, as the panels for the interviews for the Singapore and India positions.
Yes.
And in that email, it says that the Americas must be done as soon as possible. Why do the Americas need to be done as soon as possible? That was back in May 2021. The first two candidates that were, as you're aware, that were put forward was the Agent General in the UK and the stick role for Japan and Korea. And my understanding was the next role that was going to be done was the Americas role, because there were still interviews being done with the other candidates. When I told Ms. Brown that I was interested in the Stick Americas role, I completely withdrew myself from anything to do with any other appointments. So I can only comment about the first two roles to this committee. Yes, so I'm just trying to get to I suppose, the sense of urgency back within the department at that time in May to recruit the Americas as soon as possible. There was also a slideshow that was released as well in the order for documents by the Upper House, which showed the fact that the New York office was going to have an official launch in November, for example.
Yes.
So everything was well underway, as far as you're aware, ready to launch and hit go in November 2021?
Yes, that is correct.
What did you have anything to do with, for example, helping helping plan the November launch? Were you involved in any way, or had you not started because you hadn't been offered your contract?
I had not been started because I'd not offered my contract, and because I was performing the DepSec Trade and International role at the time, I would deal with Ms Brown's office directly on the Americas role, because I didn't want my team to get unsettled about me potentially having another role.
Okay, thank you. So, just in terms of can I just check just in terms of that almost $1 million fit out that was being reported for the New York office? All of that didn't start, as far as you're aware, kind of before, like during the time that you were in that period in September. Do you know when that was actually, who signed off on that and how that was done? Or is
so there was, in terms of the fit out, as part of the planning for the international network fit out, we had all been involved, and I was also involved in program planning of rolling out the offices, getting the legals, getting the risk, getting the compliance, getting the fit-outs done around the world. And we were involved, we had an external company come in and negotiate leases and costs to get that done, but that was done within the operations area that came under the Chief Operations Office.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to just go back again to some of the evidence that we heard from Ms Brown at the last hearing. So she did inform this committee that contract was never issued, and that's potentially, you're saying that was correct. And the formal offer was never made. And I just wanted to get a sense from you, because it says here, she said the formal offer was never made. Like in your view, in terms of that brief from the Premier at the time, as well as what Amy Brown offered you, did you treat that as a formal offer when it was made?
Yes, I did. I got verbally offered the job. I'd negotiated the terms of my contract. I had a signed-off briefing document from the Premier noting my appointment to the Senior Trade and Americas role, and I was told that the contract would be ready in 4 weeks, and I was chasing that contract, so I thought that was a formal offer. And that
the thing that you have been informed in terms of why that contract was never offered was the payroll issue in terms of operating in New York.
Sorry, say that again.
So what the reason that you were told in terms of the delay in the contract beyond 4 weeks
was to do with trying to get US tax advice. In the end, it was on the 14th of August, the terms of the contract were approved. And on the 16th of September, I was still chasing the contract. So I was chasing the contract for 6 weeks. And you'll see from some of the text messages, they kept saying, oh, we're waiting on security clearance, we're waiting on US taxation advice, we're waiting on this. So there was a few different reasons as to why the contract was delayed.
Thank you. And I just wanted to check as well, just in terms of, actually, I'll come back to it. My time's almost up. You go.
Thank you. Ms West, thank you very much for coming today. Having read your statement and seen the evidence you've presented to us, I know how really hard this is. So thanks indeed. Just initially, how would you characterise Ms Brown's evidence in terms of what she said about you, both publicly and unfortunately been leaked into the public forum in relation to yourself?
As I said previously, I was very shocked, because until I heard Ms Brown's evidence, I thought that we had a very good professional relationship. We'd even, had a very successful recent tour with a number of the European ambassadors up to the Hunter Valley. We'd sat next to each other on the bus. We'd talked about how we could support the people and businesses of New South Wales, and until that evidence, I thought that we had a very, very good professional relationship.
So, in a sense, I don't want to sound trite about it, but effectively they closed ranks against you after you were gone and threw you under the bus. Is that right? Is that
I can't comment on that, but all I can say is that I haven't been in Investment New South Wales since end of November last year. I've moved on, tried to move on with my life, and so to, in retrospect, have something like that said about me is quite disappointing.
You sought a meeting with Mr. Coates-Trotter after you lost the senior trade role, did he? I know in evidence he said he didn't revert to you formally, but were you reverted to in any way from anybody in relation to that request?
No, I was not.
So you were left completely in the dark. You didn't get a chance to answer anything or ask any questions?
No, I did not, and I had no idea what had happened until I heard that he had just referred that back to Investment New South Wales.
Next was your letter of termination. That's the next time you formally heard from him at all in relation to this matter?
Yes, correct.
Why do you think that you were terminated completely?
I honestly don't know. You'd have to ask Ms. Brown. You were obviously very disappointed by the evidence that was leaked into the public arena in relation to the in-camera evidence. Regarding the content of that evidence from Ms. Brown, how did that actually make you feel at the time? I was very shocked and upset. I've worked exceptionally hard for my career over the years, and I'm a very professional person that works because I enjoy it. I love working with people. I love building great teams. So I was quite horrified by what she had said because it is so different from who I am.
Do you think that that may have a longer-term effect on your ability to gain senior roles in the future, both in the private and in the public sector?
I am concerned about that. And I would hope in the future an organisation will take me for who I am and see the truth.
Thank you. And look, you obviously may not know the answer to this question, but in terms of all things considered, what we know now is in the public arena, do you think it was part of a normal process for the appointment to change and be interfered with by Mr. Barilaro's office?
I had questions around the process. As I said previously, I couldn't quite understand how there was a public sector process fully underway and that I had gone through an independent panel interview process, being deemed as the best candidate based on a range of criteria, being verbally offered the role, and preparations underway to finalise a contract, and then to have that role rescinded and told it was on hold, and then a process up through Cabinet to make it a political appointment. I couldn't understand that process.
Ms. Brown gave us evidence, if I recollect correctly, that occurred after she'd had a discussion with someone in Mr. Barilaro's office.
You would have to ask Ms. Brown about that.
Yeah, no, well, I believe that's the evidence she offered to us at the time. Do you think Mr. Barilaro himself may have interfered in the process? Have you got any inkling in relation to that?
I can't comment on that.
Can't comment on that? Okay,
no.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. We will now go to questions from the government members. Mr. Fang.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. West, for appearing today. I can appreciate it is extremely difficult, and I thank you for the candour with which you've provided the evidence to this point. The first question I'll ask is one that was asked of the previous witness in the hearing, and it was, I think, the first question that was asked by the opposition. Have you or any representative or part of your legal team spoken to any member of this committee or provided documents to them in relation to this matter?
No, they have not.
They have not. Thank you. In relation to Sticks Americas, Was it the only role, are you aware, that was not proceeded with under the restructure or reappointment process handled by government?
I can't comment about the other roles. The two roles that I can comment about is the Agent General role and the STIC Japan and Korea's role that were public sector appointments before the change in terms of political appointments.
Okay, and how many sticks are there in total, do you know?
6, including the Agent General.
Okay, so the change of mechanics around the appointment was not only affecting Sticks America, is that right? It affected a number of the other STIC appointments.
That is my understanding.
So you were...
But you would have to ask Ms Brown on that because I was not involved in that subsequent processes.
So is it fair to then conclude that your position that you... the Sticks America position wasn't the only position that was potentially recruited for, but then had to go back to a second round?
I can't comment on those other roles because I wasn't involved in that process.
Okay. When you have put in the email to, you've communicated through email to, I think you said to Mr Mookie's question, your lawyers at the time, that the role was a present for somebody. Was that in reference to the position being a political or a ministerial appointment?
I can't comment on that. I just thought it was an unusual turn of phrase at the time.
Okay. So you didn't draw any conclusions as to what made it a present to somebody. Is that fair?
At the time, I was just surprised at the turn of phrase, so noted it down.
And do you believe the recruitment process that you underwent was rigorous and thorough?
Yes, I do. And that wasn't just the first recruitment process that I had been in since moving into New South Wales Government. When I went in as the Deputy Secretary of Trade and International, I went through another independent recruitment process. I went through psychometric testings and I went through another independent panel interview. So this vetted independent recruitment process that I went through for the Stick America's role was actually the second time in New South Wales Government that I had gone through an independent panel and been told I was the preferred candidate.
So in relation to the members who were on your panel for interview, you had a number of people, Warwick Smith, I believe, was one, the person from NGS Global. Do you believe they conducted it with integrity and thoroughness, impartiality?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And Ms Katrina Lowe, have you met her?
Yes,
previously?
I have.
And would you say that she's somebody that acts with honesty and integrity?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Having been through that recruitment process, which you've described as rigorous and thorough, do you think that would indicate that you are highly suitable for the role?
That is my understanding. It was an independent panel.
So,
and that's what I was told by Ms Brown at the time as well.
So what we know now is that when the decision was made to re-look at the Sticks America position, along with the other stick positions which weren't concluded at the time we had the recruitment process, it didn't actually go to a ministerial or political appointment as you've described it. Minister Ayres continued it with a public service appointment.
And I was not aware of that until it came out in the media.
Right. So in that instance, Mr. Barilaro applied as a public citizen, would you agree? As a private citizen, would you agree with that?
I can't, to be honest, I can't comment on things post my redundancy. I got made redundant on the 30th of November, and those subsequent events happened once I'd left the public service, so I don't feel that I'm in a position to answer that.
No, I guess I'm just working through some of the issues that have come up. So we know that you went through a very rigorous and very thorough recruitment process for the role. We know now that Mr. Barilaro went through exactly the same rigorous, impartial process, because it wasn't a political appointment, it was a public service appointment, which included a number of the members of the same board that you had your interview with. Katrina Lowe was on that interview panel. You've stated now that you have confidence in Ms. Lowe being impartial and thorough in her work. Would that not indicate to you that Mr. Barilaro earned the job on merit, having passed the same recruitment process that you did for the role, not as a political appointment?
I can't comment on that, and the reason I can't comment on that is that I was under the understanding, and I had been told in terms of my own role, that it was being changed to a political appointment and not a public sector appointment.
I guess the question that I'm asking now, though, is that given that we've had more information come to light, and you have the fortunate experience that you've undertaken that very rigorous recruitment process, would you agree that for somebody to have passed that rigorous recruitment process with a number of independent and highly regarded members on the interview panel, the person who came out on top of that list for the role would have earned it on merit?
I can't comment in relation to you'd have to ask the panel members and Amy Brown. I don't feel that I'm in a position to comment in regards to someone else's appointment.
Okay. If you had gone through the recruitment process that you did for the role, would you have considered it a present to you?
No, I have never perceived working for the people and businesses of New South Wales as a present. I feel like it's a duty by myself as a citizen to really make a difference out there.
So it would be fair to say that if you had undergone the recruitment process as you did, it would have been earned on merit, not a present.
I can't comment on that.
Okay. Just in relation to and I'm going to take up the point that Mr. Mookie raised at the during his questioning around the emails that you sent to lawyers. You had engaged lawyers at that time?
Yes, I did initially, because I was trying to understand I had questions around the process, and I was concerned that I may be made redundant without anything.
Okay. Did those lawyers communicate with Investment New South Wales?
Yes, they did.
What did they indicate they were representing you about?
About my role and understanding.
Which of the roles are we talking about here? Are we talking about the Sticks Americas component, or are we talking about your Deputy Secretary role?
My understanding is it was about...
Sorry, when you say your understanding, okay. I imagine you're instructing your lawyers.
Yes, I am.
So can you clarify?
So that would be the legal letters would be the conversation between the lawyers would be a conversation between the lawyers and government.
Okay. I noticed they're not actually tabled in any of the correspondence that we've been given here. Can you perhaps provide some elucidations to us as to were they seeking something? Were they seeking clarification? What?
I'll have to take that on notice.
Okay.
That's a point of order, Chair.
Yes.
I'm questioning, but the questioner might be aware that the witness might be entitled to claim legal professional privilege over direct communications between her lawyers and others. So there is an element of just in the way you frame your questions, you may wish to do so in a way which doesn't invite the witness to have to give up her privilege.
Oh, I did not believe that I was, but I'll take the point on board. Thank you.
So that's to the point of order.
Well, no, I'm taking the point without you having to rule.
Sure. Well, that's fine. Continue. So you have, yep.
Thank you. So the lawyers that were representing you at the time wrote to, when you say the government, who were they directing those letters to?
Ms Amy Brown.
Ms Amy Brown. Okay. Was it seeking compensation for what had occurred around the sticks roll?
I feel that this is something between the government and the lawyer, and I don't feel I'm in a position to answer that.
Well, I think in
Order, Mr. Fang. I'll just have you note the witness's response and don't push that line of questioning given her response.
No, I've not even said a
Sounded
word,
like you
Chair.
were. Just
No. Well, thank you, Chair. I appreciate the mind reading, but however, I will continue with questioning. That's okay.
you can continue with questioning.
Well, I'm just. Mr. Mookie actually raised his point, so I'm just, I guess, expanding on this. So I'm just trying to find out exactly.
He was warning you off the point.
No,
rather
he
than
raised it in
expanding
his
the point.
question. Ms. Sharp.
Order. Continue, Mr. Fang.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mookie obviously raised the issue of lawyers that you engaged, and therefore I'm just seeking to find out what it was that they thought was the issue that they were discussing with the government. So,
Point of order.
Mr. Borzak on probably the similar point of order as Mr. Mookie. Mr. Borzak?
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Fang is doing exactly the same thing and ignoring your ruling. He is asking
Using up my
for
time,
detailed
this is how we're going to go.
about what Ms. West's communications with her lawyers was.
Yes, thank you.
That is covered by privilege, and you should not be asking questions on that line, or even worse, don't expect an answer.
Thank you, Mr. Borzak. So just to the point of order, Mr. Fang, please do not continue asking questions about what is being conducted between Ms. West and her lawyers or her lawyers and the government, and just do not proceed along those lines of questions. We've had 2 points of order to it. If you could continue questions, but another
interesting the number of points of order that have been raised on this issue. Okay. Ms. West, in the documents that you've tabled are a number of certificates. There's 2 medical certificates. I think it was from the 1st of October to the 8th of October, then from the 8th of October to the 12th of October.
Yes.
Now, obviously you've tabled those, so you're happy for them to be made public.
Yes, I am.
And they would correspond, obviously, with the timing of when you were notified by Ms. Brown about your role in Sticks. Is that correct?
Sorry, say that question again.
They would correspond with Ms. Brown notifying you around the Sticks role. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that you were impacted by the news that you weren't to be the Sticks America appointee?
I was very disappointed at the time to not I was very disappointed in being told that I wasn't successful for the Stick America's role, and as you're aware from my previous testimony, I had also at the same time been told I would not potentially have a current position. So my doctor advised that I just have some time out, which I did.
Chair, can I check how much time I've got left before I continue down?
A few minutes.
A few minutes,
Yeah.
okay. And what time are we breaking for?
And then we'll proceed to the break.
Then we have a break.
Okay. I just don't want to start a line of questioning.
I've got a few.
Well, I'll pass to Mr. Follow.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms West, for making yourself available today and being here. Just wanted to go through in terms of some of your negotiations that you had with Ms Amy Brown in terms of the cost of living. And I know there's been a fair bit of criticism with respect to the salaries that are being paid with respect to these roles. And I note in your documentation, I think it's in an exchange with Ms Brown, you actually raised the equivalent of Austrade's packages, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
So the package with Austrade, total package is 500 to 600,000, is that correct?
Correct.
And there's been some criticism in particular in terms of the salary that was paid to the Agent General in London. Now, there was some consideration of living expenses there, is that correct? Did you have any knowledge of that?
I can't comment on that. You'd have to ask Ms Brown.
Okay. And with respect to your package, you were looking at the line of compensation that was provided for both New York and Tokyo, is that correct, because of cost of living challenges in both of those cities?
Correct.
So with respect to that in that negotiation, I know, of course, that a contract wasn't settled in the end, but where did you reach? What was the total figure at that stage that
I'd have to take that on notice.
Okay. But in regards to that package, that was seen as being equivalent to the Austrade equivalent roles, is that correct? And fair for that package?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, that is, let's go to break now. So it's 11:26, so we'll have a 15-minute break. So we'll be back here at 11:41. All right, thank you. Okay. Welcome back. We'll get straight into things. So questions from the opposition. Ms Benishop.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms West. I wanted to take you to one of the documents that you've got in the folder that you've provided to the committee, which is Friday the 17th of September 2021 at 7 a.m. It's one of your handwritten notes.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering if you could just take us through that.
Brain dead, you've got to start again.
Well, yeah, I mean, really, I suppose I'm asking if you could actually read that for the committee for us.
Yes, sure.
Especially for Shoebridge.
17th of...
Yep, the 7 a.m.
Maybe we can.
Yeah, I mean, so basically, I mean...
okay, sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
Do you want me to take through? Take the whole thing. Just take their time.
You would like me to...
Maybe for context, Ms West, the file note says that Ms Brown texted you on Thursday night asking if she could catch up for a walking meeting the next morning at Balmoral.
Yes, correct.
And you agreed to go on the walk?
Yes, I did.
And this walk took place at circa 7 a.m. in the morning?
Yes, it did.
And then you say in this file note that during our walk she went on to explain, despite me being verbally offered the Stick America's role, the Premier signing off on the job, she could not progress in my contract currently. She went on to inform me that the DP had put up a separate submission to Cabinet to get the authority for decision making in regards to these roles. Did you understand the reference to DPB to be the Deputy Premier?
Yes, I did.
Sure. And then apparently you responded by going, I said, well, do you want to read your response?
Can I just, sorry, and I just want to check that the note you talk about that the Deputy Premier had put up a separate submission to Cabinet to get the authority for the decision making in regards to these roles to go direct to himself and not Infrastructure. Is that?
It would be in Investment New South Wales.
Yep. Right, thank you.
Do you want to read your response, please?
I said I was horrified he could do that after going through the formal interview process, panel, verbal offer and sign-off.
She can't comment, right? It was all
Did Ms Brown say to you that she didn't disapprove with anything I said and had told them that I had already signed the contract?
Correct.
But to be clear here, Ms Brown, you expressed your horror at the Deputy Premier filing a separate submission to Cabinet to get the authority for decision-making regarding these roles to go to himself, and Ms Brown agreed with you that it was effectively horrible.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then is it the case that Ms Brown put some options to you as to what some alternatives could be? As in, it says here, went on to say options push out 3 years, India and Singh only, but hands were tied and couldn't do anything else until Cabinet decision to endorse or not.
Yes, that's correct. But that's when she raised the question around my funding being reallocated elsewhere.
Yeah, which, to be fair, I think you may make a reference to. Do you mind reading onwards from the paragraph that begins, "We also spoke," to the end of the first paragraph on the next page?
Yes, we also spoke about my role moving forward. She said she'd already used my salary to fund Managing Director investment and cover additional costs in Europe.
Yes, can you go on for the next paragraph?
She said we would have to wait until Cabinet. I said I was happy to keep doing what I was doing based on decisions.
And then can you read the next paragraph on the first paragraph on the next page?
How could he just change some things like that to put his mates in roles to help with the election?
Sorry, so is that a question that you asked in that conversation?
Yes, it was.
So to be clear here, you asked Ms Brown, how could he just change something like that to put his mates in the role to help with the election question mark? Just to be clear here, when you said how could he, who were you referring to?
I can't remember at the time.
Is it possible that you were making a reference to the Deputy Premier?
I can't remember at the time.
Okay, but you clearly had a suspicion that the reason why there was a change in the cabinet process that led to the withdrawal of the offer that was made to you was so someone could put his mate in the role to help with the election.
I can't comment on that.
But that's the note you made.
Yes, it is the note I made.
Yeah. Thank you. Can I just go forward then to the next note, which is timed Friday the 17th of September, 1:02 p.m. This is, sorry, just before we do, that file note that we were reading from before about the Balmoral walk, how long was the walk?
About 20 minutes.
A 20-minute walk. And presumably Balmoral was convenient to you or Miss Brown or both?
Correct.
And you made this note as soon as the walk was finished?
Yes, correct.
So you came home and you made the note?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And was this just to keep for your records?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And then presumably the Friday of the 17th of September, we are in a lockdown, so you're working from home at this point in time?
Yes, correct.
And so you then have a discussion with Mr. Carr, the head of legal at Investment New South Wales?
Yes.
And did that conversation take place on phone, on Teams?
Over the phone.
Right. And then you spoke to him as well. And did he say that he was horrified to hear about the situation you were in and couldn't believe what was being proposed?
Yes, he did.
And was his comments were you were offered the job, had it signed off, and it was just making the contract and then this happens?
Correct.
Waiting on the contract, I think that is, yeah.
Waiting, sorry, it's my handwriting.
Can you just read the next paragraph?
I know how it feels having worked globally. You're uprooting your family, your life to go to another country, and then they do this to you. If it was me, I would be bitterly disappointed.
And those were Mr. Carr's comments
to you? That was Mr. Carr's comments to me.
Can you read the next paragraph on the next page, please?
I went on to explain the concerns I had about being promised the role and finalising details. I also raised concerns about the relevant experience levels of candidates the DP would put in.
So when you say I also raised concerns about the relevant experience levels of candidates the DP would put in, the DP there is Deputy Premier?
Correct. My understanding at that time was it would be a political appointment. So that's why and he was the Trade Minister at the time.
Yeah. And is it the case that the General Counsel, Head of Legal, at Investment New South Wales replied by saying that that was why they specifically called out trade and investment experience in the job description?
Correct.
So effectively, the Head of Legal tells you that they are taking precautionary measures to ward off the prospect that the DP would indeed put in someone who doesn't have relevant experience. Is that how you interpreted his statement?
I can't. You'd have to ask the legal counsel in that regard.
Yeah. Do you have any more on this note, John?
Not on this note.
Can I just ask
just that it occurred at this note was this discussion occurred at 1:02 p.m.
Yes, it did.
And you made this note contemporaneously?
I made it on the spot after it. Yes.
Yeah. And this was because you were just keeping records of conversations that you were having?
I was concerned about the process and the impact on my existing role I'd been performing, and I felt that it was important to file the conversations because I didn't know whether I had a job.
At this point, these file notes are being made because earlier Ms Brown had expressed to you the possibility, in fact the reasonable possibility, that you were facing a redundancy.
Yes, correct.
And in fact, often in circumstances like that, it's relatively prudent for all people to keep records of conversations they're having with their employer.
Yes, correct.
And you are an experienced person who's worked in multiple organisations?
Yes, I have.
And that's basically common practice, is it not?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Just one question, just to be clear, Ms West, in the lead up to this process, you talked about in your previous testimony that there'd been no discussion about abolishing your role or in the lead up to this process, the first time you heard about it was on the Balmoral Walk. Is that correct?
Yes, and the only other prior discussion that I'd had with Miss Brown was if I was to go to the Americas, given the huge workload that I had, how I could potentially continue to help on elements of that workload over in the Americas and then hand off elements of it to other people as well to do. Because I was working on a very large 5-year strategic program of work and I didn't want that to be slowed down.
Thanks very much, Ms West.
Ms West, I just want to take you to one more file note before I hand to my colleague. This is a file note of a conversation which takes place on the 27th of the 9th, 2021, which is identified as call from Amy 5:48 p.m. This is the conversation where I think Ms Brown informs you of the Cabinet's decision. Having checked the calendar, the 27th, I think, is a Monday, and it's common for Cabinet to meet on Monday, and I think some of the evidence we heard earlier said that this submission went to the Cabinet on the Monday. And so at 5:48 p.m, which is presumably after the Cabinet deliberations, Ms Brown calls you and says, it didn't go my way. Is that what it says?
Yes, correct.
She said, unfortunately, no, the Cabinet, what does it say, passed the proposal?
Passed the proposal.
So when Ms Brown was saying it didn't go my way, was she leaving you the impression that she had provided advice to the Cabinet not to proceed down the path that was being contemplated by the Deputy Premier?
I can't comment on that. My understanding was from that comment that by saying it didn't go my way is that I would not be getting the Stick Americas role.
Okay, that's how you interpreted it.
That's how I interpreted it at the time.
Yeah. And he says here, I have spoken to Tim Reardon and getting Chris Carr Legal involved as you are the most impacted. The other sticks had been interviewed but no contracts issued, but you were offered the job. I am so sorry. Is that what Miss Brown said to you?
Yes, that is correct.
That's not what you said to Miss Brown, that's what Miss
That's what Miss Brown said to me.
And so did she provide any detail as to the conversation she had with the then head of the Department of Premier and Cabinet, Mr Reardon?
No, she did not.
Okay. Can you just read the last paragraph of that? This is your response to Ms Brown?
I can't believe it. I came into government to make a difference and have delivered so much over the past year. Rolled out the international network, taken 150 exporters global, helped export diversification, set up services and tech export team, population skills and migration, returned international students, and delivered just to get my legs taken from underneath me.
Presumably that's how you felt at the time?
That is how I felt at the time.
That's how you feel still now?
I moved forward, and I'm a big believer is you have to back yourself and move forward. At the time I was shocked, but I came into New South Wales Government and the public service with a very clear view to give back to the people and businesses of New South Wales, and I believed I did whilst I was there.
Okay, I've just got a few more on this one before I pass to my colleagues. Just on the second page of this file note, apparently Ms Brown replies to your expressing your view. I'm sorry, I just can't make out your handwriting. What does that say? I don't have the
words.
Yeah, right. And then she says, Kate, bracket legal, which I think might be a reference to the General Counsel of DPC. Is that your understanding?
That is my understanding.
Okay, said it got through. I don't know the specifics, but the Premier said that there was a lot on the agenda for the meeting, and sometimes she had to let it through. Is that what it says? Or let go through? Is that what it says?
Some items.
Some items she had to let go through. Okay, and that's what Ms Brown said to you?
Yes, correct.
And did you understand that to be a reference to a conversation Ms Brown had with then Premier Berejiklian?
I can't comment on that.
Okay, but that's just at least what Ms Brown said to you?
Yes, correct.
So she did specifically mention that I don't know the specifics, but the Premier said that there was a lot on the agenda for the meeting, and sometimes she had to let
Some
items she had to let go through.
I can't comment on that because that would be cabinet and confidence, and so I can't comment about what's happened in cabinet.
Sure. I won't press you then. Ms West, just finally on this file note, can you just read your last paragraph?
I'm flabbergasted and still in shock. I don't know what else to say.
And does that how the conversation ended?
Yes, it did.
And was it a long conversation or was it a short 2 minute?
Relatively short. There wasn't a lot more to say, to be honest.
And you then also wrote a record of the conversation immediately?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'll pass to my colleague.
Can I ask you to turn to that note that was texted to you, the briefing note to the Premier? I just want to take you to that document if you can. And just while you're finding that, I'll just indicate that I particularly want to deal with this issue, the suggestion that's been made that a successful candidate was not identified in the process. So if you've got that note in front of you, it's briefing for the Premier. The very first line, you agree, says appointment of Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner Americas. You agree with that?
Yes, correct.
Yep. And the very first thing this note says is a successful candidate for the role of Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner, STIC Americas, has been identified. You agree with that?
Yes, correct.
It then indicates that in the purpose, Ms Jenny West has been identified as the successful candidate for the STIC Americas role. The Deputy Premier and the Treasurer will also be notified of Ms West's selection. You agree with that?
Yes, correct.
You're then identified as the successful candidate in the third dot point down in the background. After a full recruitment process, the recruitment panel has identified Ms Jenny West, Deputy Secretary Trade and Investment Group, Investment New South Wales, as a successful candidate.
Yes, correct.
Yep. Under consultation, it again refers to the successful candidate being recommended by the panel.
Correct.
It indicates that the final panel selection report from NGS Global is attached to this briefing note. Next dot point.
Yep.
And finally, it indicates that asks the Premier to note that Investment New South Wales will liaise with the Premier's office to offer a meeting between the Premier and Ms West to discuss priorities for international trade and investment for New South Wales prior to her relocating to New York. Did that meeting ever happen?
No, it did not.
And finally, this is signed by the Premier on the 12th of August 2021, and the Premier's indicated that she is noting that
yes,
briefing.
Correct.
You agree with that?
Can I just follow up on that? Do you see down the bottom here that it says approved CEO Amy Brown, 11th of August 2021? EPC final approver. Do you see that?
Yes, I see that.
Were you aware at the time that such a briefing was being prepared for the Premier?
It was normal process with all the prior roles and my role that there would be briefings done to relevant ministers' offices.
And those relevant ministers included the Deputy Premier, correct?
Correct.
And were you aware that a similar briefing note, or would it surprise you that a similar briefing note went to the Deputy Premier's office on the 11th of the 8th?
No, that wouldn't surprise me. I can't comment on that because I don't know.
Ms West, in the hearing...
And the other office that it would have gone to was to the former Treasurer.
The Treasurer.
To Perrottet.
You'd have to ask Ms Brown about that because I wasn't privy to when the briefing notes went to various ministerial offices.
But you agree that that's what this note says would occur?
Yes, correct.
To be fair to Ms West, we did ask Ms Brown and she did confirm.
Okay.
It's okay. But what I was interested in is that we took evidence from Ms Brown about an urgent desire from the Deputy Premier to receive a specific briefing on the STIC Americas position from the 2nd of August. At the time, you were working Investment New South Wales at that time?
Yes, I was.
Were you aware that the Deputy Premier's office was seeking an urgent briefing about the appointment of the Americas role prior to this briefing note?
No, I was not.
Were you aware that Ms Brown had facilitated that urgent request?
No, I was not.
And were you aware that as part of that urgent ability to provide that briefing to the Deputy Premier's office as a matter of urgency, I think as it was described in one of the emails, that Ms Brown caused all the original panel members to sign the selection report? Were you aware of that?
No, I was not aware of that.
Were you aware that at that time, the incoming head of the DPC, Mr. Betts, had warned Miss Brown to expect ministerial meddling?
No, I was not.
Did Miss Brown ever have a conversation with you in which she informed you about the warning she had received from Mr. Betts?
No, I had not.
So at this point, you have been kept away from a lot of this because presumably you were a candidate for the role.
Yes, I have. As far as I was concerned, I was offered the job and it was put on hold and I was chasing a contract at this stage.
We also heard from Miss Brown that after receiving the meeting, the briefing note, presumably very similar to this, Mr. Barilaro's office made contact with the head of legal at Investment New South Wales to seek advice about converting them into a ministerial appointment. Were you aware that such a request had been received?
No, I was not.
Ms. West, I just wanted to go to some of the transcript by Ms. Amy Brown from the first hearing, where she states that she first informed the candidate on the 17th of September, as you've said, that things were likely to go this way, and it was then that the relationship between the candidate and Investment New South Wales became troublesome. By the 1st of October, when I, as decision maker, officially closed the recruitment process, I was of the view that there were no suitable candidates. Do you know what Ms. Brown was referring to when she says troublesome?
No, I don't. And I've struggled with that phrase, to be honest, because we had a very good relationship. And if you look back to my chronology of events, on the 17th of September, she'd told me that I wasn't getting the Americas role, and she'd told me that I potentially wouldn't be getting my existing role. But then I was just waiting on advice at that stage as to whether it would be endorsed by Cabinet or not. I had no knowledge of that. And so I was continuing to do my existing role, and I was also working on a very large program of work on population skills and migration for the state. So I was just busily going about doing my job and chasing a contract at that stage. So I did not feel that there was anything untoward at that stage.
Yes, because the file note that you have, or the note that you sent to your lawyers, I believe, is, on the 14th of October, the note from the meeting with Amy Brown that we've already discussed in this hearing, where it's dated 14th of October, re-note, important confidential. This is the one that Amy Brown says to you at the end of the meeting, just before the end of the meeting. Yes, of course, you are an extraordinary performer, and I am upset that this has happened. Mm-hmm. So that was on the 14th of October.
Yes, correct.
So going back to the 17th of September, when she informs this committee that the relationship between the candidate and Investment New South Wales became troublesome, it's clearly a relationship between, was she implying that there was a relationship between you and the department that had somehow become troublesome? Because all intents and purposes, but at this stage, Amy Brown was still incredibly impressed with your performance.
Yeah, and I was, I don't believe that it was, she used the words, I think it was irreconcilable.
Irreconcilable differences.
Yeah, and I would disagree with that completely. I had a very good relationship with Miss Brown, and we'd literally gone down and had a chat about me not getting the Stick Americas role, and I was trying to understand why I couldn't continue doing the work I wanted to do in the DepSec Trade and International role, because I was working on a 5-year population skills and migration project for the entire state, which would have been very important, pivoting our kids for the future into new sectors, helping with skilled migration, and I felt very passionate about using my expertise to help with that. So I was, even though I was shocked by the decision, I was looking forward to continuing my public sector role in my existing position at that stage. So I'm unclear as to why she said that.
Yes, because it does seem to imply that despite of everything that we've heard this morning about you being the preferred candidate, given everything but the contract in terms of the offer, then suddenly the relationship with the department, if you like, as in with Investment New South Wales, had become so troublesome, whatever that means, that both of the potential commissioner role as well as the deputy secretary role were no longer tenable. Who do you, because Investment New South Wales isn't a person, you can't shed any light on why Ms. Brown informed the committee that did she use that word to you?
I had not heard any of these comments from Miss Brown, and I'd had no feedback in relation to my performance, how I worked with other people. I'd had no negative feedback during my entire time there. So it has come as a big shock and is very untrue.
Yes, okay. I just, this is my final question, actually, because a lot of my questions have been asked already.
Usually coordinate better than that.
Can I just wanted to go to just back to early in the piece when I think you were part of the recruitment process with the Agent General and the sticks for North Asia. Is that
Yes, correct.
correct? There was evidence that was uncovered in some of the original documents that were released to the Parliament in November last year, but also Amy Brown also confirmed this in her evidence, that this is in relation to preparing paperwork to go to Cabinet.
Yes.
So Amy had said that the Agent General, of course, and the Stick North Asia had already gone through. Then we were preparing the paperwork for the next three, ASEAN, India and the Middle East and the Americas. And this is Amy's words. I actually caught myself and said, I don't think this is quite right that they're going to Cabinet, but let me check with somebody who knows a bit more than I do. I did that and it was confirmed that indeed the previous appointments went to Cabinet in error. As Amy Brown's kind of 2IC, if you like, did she ever raise any concerns with you that the positions were going to Cabinet at any stage? Did she ever discuss this with you?
She discussed that they were going to Cabinet, but I can't comment on on what was said publicly around going in error. I can't comment on that.
So did you and her have any discussions? Did she say to you, oh, you know what, these are the Agent General and the first North Asia stick had already gone through, but in fact, now that I've thought about it, why are these going to Cabinet, and indeed maybe we should reconsider that process?
We had no conversation about that. There were conversations when I was in Investment New South Wales about the Agent General and the Stick Tokyo roles having to go up through Cabinet.
Okay.
That's as far as I can talk about it that I know.
That you're aware of?
Yeah, that I'm aware of, yes,
okay.
Correct.
All right. Okay, thank you. I'll just check with Mr. Borza. Any questions? Okay, we're going to go to the government for their 20 minutes now.
Thank you. And thanks again, Ms. West. I just wanted to go to the point that I guess Ms. Fairman was discussing with you earlier about the relationship between yourself and Investment New South Wales, we'll say, as the organisation. Would it be fair to say that you sought compensation from Investment New South Wales over the Sticks appointment?
That would be a conversation between the government and my lawyers.
But did you seek through either instructing lawyers or just in general compensation?
I received no compensation apart from my standard entitlement under a redundancy of 38 weeks.
I appreciate that. The question I asked was, did you instruct or seek that you or somebody on your behalf
Let's take a point of order.
Yeah.
Point of order. Point of order.
No, I think it's a very valid
There's actually
question.
order. There was
Just
three
because- just-
order.
no, no, no.
Mr. Fang, no, I'm sorry. Points of order have been taken, in fact, by 3 members simultaneously.
Yeah, they're interesting,
I'll go
that.
to Ms. Housos first for it, actually.
Yeah, my point of order related to the previous point of order that was taken. Ms. West is entitled to claim legal and professional privilege over the conversations that she has with her lawyers. She appears to have done that. Mr. Fang is instead choosing to press that. I ask that you rule the question out of order.
Yes, thank you.
To the point of order.
To the point of order.
While her conversations and her communications between her and her lawyer are privileged, understood, the question as to whether Ms. West was seeking compensation from Investment New South Wales is not privileged, and the question should be ruled in order.
The point of order.
Point of
To
order.
the point of
Mr. Mookie.
Perhaps the way through this is, rather than Mr. Fang phrasing his question as, did you instruct your lawyers, which is clearly a confidential communication between Ms. West and her lawyers, maybe the way Mr. Fang should phrase it is, have you sought compensation?
Which is what I asked in the original
And
question.
just Mr. Fang, and then perhaps without making any
nobody heard it
reference
that way.
to lawyers, that might be to give the witness an opportunity to answer. And then Mr. Fang might also want to ask whether or not Ms. West has indeed commenced any action.
I will invite you to read the transcript.
Thank you, Mr. Fang. Yes, I uphold Ms. Housos's point of order in terms of please respect the legal privilege of the witness and
Which I did.
redirect your question in a different manner.
Ms. West, have you sought compensation from Investment New South Wales over the Sticks appointment?
Yes, I did. I received nothing more than the 38 weeks of entitlement.
So you sought compensation. Do you perhaps think that by pursuing that avenue, the relationship between you and investment may have become strained?
I was trying to understand the process and what had happened, and I wasn't getting sufficient answers, so... Did you resolve the compensation claim? I got nothing more than the 38 weeks of entitlement that I was owed.
Are you still pursuing the compensation claim?
Well,
Well, keep digging, Wes. You're digging a deep hole for yourself.
Well,
I'm
I'm not
gonna
asking you,
Order,
Deputy Chair.
order.
I'm asking the witness, and I'm asking whether the witness is still pursuing.
I will remind members to please don't interject. Mr. Fang.
I was going to take a point of order, though.
Oh, okay.
Again, we're straying a bit too close to matters that involve the witness's legal professional privilege. And equally, it's open to us to perhaps suggest that it might not be within the terms of reference as well, but I just pressed the first point. I think it's getting precariously close to, again, inviting the witness to surrender their privilege.
To the point of order, once again, I've not asked about instruction. I've just asked simply, is Ms. West, as a private citizen, seeking compensation at this stage, at the moment, from Investment New South Wales? The next question I will foreshadow will be what happened to the claim that you did put in previously, and how was it resolved?
Sorry,
Just point of order.
Yeah, so was that to the point of order, Wes, because a point of order had been taken?
I'm providing some foreshadowing through the point of order.
Mr. Borzak also had
multitasking.
Order, Mr. Borzak.
As Wes, you can elect not to answer these questions or take them on notice.
I'll take them on notice, thank you.
can I just also, to the point of order before you rule, Chair, inviting a witness to canvass what is a cause of action or not a cause of action
That's it.
is still getting precariously close to not just breaching this witness's legal professional privilege, but also potentially impacting on the convention we obey when it comes to court proceedings in other courts. So I would just, perhaps the witness has taken it on notice.
Well, to the point of order, what I am seeking to do is find out whether it is a live issue still. And to that point, I need to know
The
whether
government
it
will
is.
find out in due course, won't they?
Yes, I'll just remind Mr. Fang
I've never seen so many points of order in my life.
to, welcome to the...
If you would actually follow the rulings and understand the standing orders, then maybe we'd get there.
It's a bit harder asking the questions, isn't it, Wes?
Just to the point of order.
Okay, one more, and then
The Deputy President...
Mr Fang, we just hear from Mr Mookie.
The Deputy President is entitled to explain his motivations, but the Deputy President's motivations are not relevant as to whether or not they are within the audience to ask the question. And I just remind, no other member has strayed within a matter which is before the courts or could be before the courts, which is a convention that we follow, and I dare I say the government insists we follow in hearings time and time again.
Yes, and I'll remind Mr Fang to just please be very careful with the questions that he's asking and the witness, that you are able, of course, to take questions on notice.
To point, Chair, but am I allowed to continue my time, or are we still going to eat into it?
Well, we can do a point of order on you travelling.
Mr Fang, you have plenty of time. Mr Fang, you have plenty of time left, but
can I ask a question now? Thank you.
Very careful.
Thank you. Okay, so to the point that Mr Mookie made as to whether there is a current issue before the court, did you continue with seeking compensation from Investment New South Wales?
The point of order, this is exactly the same question.
It's a relevant
It's
question.
exactly the same question.
How is it not a relevant question?
You've been warned by the chair not to go down that track, and yet you continue to do it.
Sorry, to the point of order, Chair.
Ms Sharp.
You've ruled on this a number of times. Mr Fang keeps asking the same question, but the problem is that he's not permitted to ask this question within the standing orders. That is what we are
Under
actually
what standing
drawing
order,
to.
Ms Sharp?
Legal professional privilege. Have you not been listening to the last six points
I am asked, it is
points
not
of
legal
order?
professional privilege if Ms West is continuing to seek compensation from Investment New South Wales.
Mr Fang, I would please suggest that you ask a different line of questioning. I am upholding the various points of orders that have been taken around this table, that this is skirting very close to falling within what should be the witness's legal professional privilege. So another line of questioning, please.
Well, we'll address this matter later because I don't believe that is the case. Ms West,
You're actually
Let him continue on to a new question,
why doesn't he
please.
stop arguing with the chair over her rulings?
Order.
Moving on.
Stop quibbling with the orders.
Mr Fang?
Are we still going to continue? Okay.
Yeah, you've got
Ms.
11
West.
minutes.
We discussed earlier that you included in the documents that you tabled a number of leave certificates from a doctor, and they extended for 12 days. I presume then that you returned to work on the 13th of October.
Yes, that's correct.
How was your interaction with your team and other members of Investment New South Wales at that time?
My recollection, it was fine.
Okay. So when, what projects was it that you were working on when you did return to work on the 13th of October?
The Population Skills and Migration Program of Work.
Okay. And that continued all the way through till, was it 21st of November, is that correct?
No, I was, in terms of timeline, I took personal leave from the 18th of October.
Okay.
Yep. And then I was told my employment was terminated on the 19th of November.
Okay. So after the expiry of the certificate on the 12th of October, you returned from the 13th to the 18th?
The 13th to the 14th of October.
Yes.
And then I took some sick leave on the 15th, and on the 18th I took personal leave, and both those leaves Ms Amy Brown was aware of as well.
Okay. So really, there wasn't a lot of interaction, I guess, between yourself and members of Investment New South Wales around that period. Is that fair?
Yes, I was off work.
Yeah. Okay. Just going to the file note that you made, which Mr. Mookie referenced earlier. I'm about to get to there, but just noting that you've already referenced it, just in case you want to raise a point of order about it. It says that you were worried that the changes were made to put his mates in, and obviously who he was, I guess, canvassed by Mr. Mookie, but it wasn't really identified. Do you believe that the stick appointments that have occurred so far have any of them been mates or been political appointees?
I can't comment on that. All I can comment on was the 2 appointments prior to the process being changed.
And do you believe they were mates?
I believe they went through a independent panel process that was thoroughly vetted, as was mine.
Okay. So it's fair to say then that at this stage we have had a appointment to the sticks roles for the 6 positions that have all gone through rigorous and independent rigorous and independent appointment process. Is that fair?
I can only comment on the first 2.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you believe that...
sorry, just to that point, and with the first 2, you do think that was a rigorous independent process?
That is my understanding, yes.
Yep. Do you believe Mr. Barilaro has in some way engineered a situation where the Sticks America's role was to go to him, or do you believe that it was a matter of circumstance the view that you had at your time in Investment New South Wales?
You'd have to ask Ms. Amy Brown about that. I can't comment on. I don't know.
Okay, so
Why don't you ask Mr. Barilaro that question?
Order.
Well, that may well happen.
the Deputy Chair...
Will we get a truthful answer?
The Deputy Chair had plenty of time to ask his questions.
Order. Just continue, Mr. Fang. Continue.
I did actually ask the question.
Order.
I got the same answer.
You can keep interrupting, Robert, but it's not helping you, mate.
Not helping you.
Okay, let's just keep going. Mr. Fang.
Thank you, Chair. Do you believe that the change in the appointment procedure for the 4 stick roles that weren't already finalised were done at the same time with the same rationale and the same mechanism, i.e. That they were all being recruited for, but a change in the government process through Cabinet meant that they were going to look at the roles. Do you believe that that happened for all 4 at the same time?
I can't comment on that. That's a question for Ms. Brown.
Do you recall the period in October 2021? That was a time that Sydney, and particularly New South Wales, was in lockdown, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Do you recall the government's focus at the time? Was it primarily on the pandemic? Did you have much engagement with the Trade Minister, who was the Deputy Premier at the time, in relation to trade matters?
A relevant question.
I can't recall. I know that we were all in lockdown and working from home at that stage.
Did you have the impression that the Deputy Premier had a strong focus on trade at the time of the pandemic?
I can't comment on that.
Okay. Before I pass to my colleague, I just wanted to check. You said previously, in relation to the remuneration package for the Agent General in London, that you weren't sure about that. Is that correct? Is that my recollection?
I would have to take that on notice. Yeah.
Okay. But today you gave some earlier evidence. Is that?
Well, I'd have to get Ms Brown to come back about the remuneration package for the Agent General. I don't know.
So that you don't have much of an idea about the remuneration package for the Agent General then?
No, I'd need to take that on, ask Ms Brown and take that on notice.
I believe that there's a return in the SA 52 with a brief that's been written and approved by you about the Agent General's package in London.
I'd have to take that on notice.
Okay. Mr Follow, do you have any?
Thank you very much, Ms West. Look, the only other question from me is with respect to the evidence you gave, I think in the opening statement about being barred from being able to apply from the role into the future. Is it the case that if you were to apply for the role and to be successful, that you wouldn't be barred, but you would just need to pay a portion of that 38-week settlement?
I subsequently found that out. I didn't know at the time, and my understanding at the time was that because I'd been made redundant, I couldn't apply for the role, and then my understanding at the time too was because it was a political appointment, I wouldn't be allowed to apply for the role. So for those two reasons, I didn't apply for the role.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go to questions from the opposition again. Ms Penny Sharp. Yep.
Thank you. Ms West, I wanted to just take you to the email that you've provided to us that you sent to Michael Coates-Trotter on Monday the 11th of October. Are you just able to tell the committee what were the circumstances that led you to reach out to Mr Coates-Trotter in relation to what was going on at the time?
Yeah, sure. I'll just get it. Sorry.
Yeah. It's towards the back.
Yes, I've got it here. Yep. Thank you. So the circumstances leading into sending this note to Mr Michael Coates-Trotter is that when you're in the private sector and you have any concerns, you generally raise it to your one-up manager. So he was my one-up manager. I knew he was new coming into Department of Premier and Cabinet, so I requested a 15-minute sit-down with him. I did want to correct something that was said in the media, that there was 49 pages of concerns. There was not 49 pages of concerns. All there was a simple one-page email, and then attached to that I sent out the Trade and International Strategy document to give him a background on what we did and who the team were. I also attached my CV, Premier Berejiklian's signed briefing note, and my letter of application to the Stick America's role.
Yep, no, that's great.
Clarify one point there.
Yeah, sure.
Just to be clear, Ms West, when you say that Mr Coates-Trotter was your one-up manager, he was the incoming head of the Department of Premier and Cabinet, correct?
Yes, he was.
I think you may have emailed him on his first day, actually, Monday the 11th. But equally, at this point, Investment New South Wales is within the cluster of Department of Premier and Cabinet.
Yes, it was, correct.
And that's why you assumed he was the one-up manager.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. And look, obviously you outlined in the email your CV and the work that you'd been doing on the global strategy. I'm just wondering, can you just relate to basically where you talk about the current situation, which is where you're talking about reaching out as you currently don't know whether you had a job. Can you just take us through that part of the email, please?
The current situation.
Yep.
I'm reaching out to you directly as I currently don't know whether I have a job. I applied for and was successful to take up the Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner role running the Americas. See my background and resume for your reference. This role was briefed into all Minister's office, including the Premier's, see attachment below, and my appointment into the role approved.
Yeah, can I just stop you there? I know that you've confirmed this a couple of times, but I just want to make sure your understanding of which Minister offices were briefed was the then Premier, Gladys Berejiklian, the Deputy Premier, John Barilaro, the Treasurer, Dom Perrottet, and was the Investment Minister
Minister Ayres' office as well, correct.
Yep, thank you. Sorry, go on.
I was following up with HR Legal for 3.5 weeks to get my contract, and in the meantime lodged a submission to Cabinet which was approved that affected Investment New South Wales delegations in regards to the appointments. They've moved from public service band 3 roles to political appointments.
And then can you just read that last part?
On hearing the news and speaking with Amy Brown, my manager, I asked, so do I still have a current role? And her answer was, I don't know. From discussions with her, I found out that she'd already used the money from my role to fund 2 other roles in Investment New South Wales, so I was out of a job. I am now currently waiting for confirmation of my redundancy.
Thank you. And so even though we've heard this morning that basically a role was created which was essentially your old job, there was never you heard nothing until you just got your termination letter, is
correct?
That right?
Can I just ask one quick point of clarification? The government did go under time, but you mentioned as well that that was at a different band. Is that correct? A band 3 or band 2?
Yes, so my current role as a Deputy Secretary was a band 3 role, and I had been told that money from my role was being used elsewhere and that they would be band 2 roles. And then subsequently, 1 month ago, there's a Managing Director Trade and Investment role advertised on LinkedIn, and it's advertised as a band 3 role.
Okay, thank you.
Your role was restored after you were paid out not to do it.
I can't comment on that.
Yeah.
Well, put it this way, your job was re-advertised within the 38 weeks for which you were paid?
Yes, correct.
And look, do you ever, in terms of that, the loss of your permanent position over that period of time, do you believe that, given that it was restored within the 38 weeks, do you believe that Amy Brown was working with and or liaising with ministers' offices in relation to that?
I can't comment on that. That would be a question for Ms Brown.
But the decision about organisational structure belongs to the CEO, does it not?
Yes, it does.
And there is no board at Investment New South Wales that has the ability to exercise decision-making in that respect? That's your understanding?
That is my understanding. I'm not sure.
And so the ability to both terminate the role and restore the role is a prerogative of the CEO. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, correct.
Can I...
I just had one further question. Two further questions. Just to go back to that email to Mr Coates-Trotter, it says under the current situation, this role was briefed to all ministers' offices. You meant in that relevant ministers' offices, is that correct? Being the Premier, the Deputy Premier, the Treasurer and the Investment Minister?
Yes, correct. Relevant, not all. Correct.
But they are the ministers that you expect received
as per the previous stick appointments, an Agent General appointment, correct.
And a similar briefing to what then went to the Premier.
Correct.
I just wanted to ask you about turning over the page to the top. It says, I've been on the Band 3 Leadership Academy. So you were not only doing well, as you said previously, you'd received performance reviews, you'd obviously progressed through the public service, you'd also been identified for further leadership opportunities.
Yes, I'd been put on it's called the Band 3 Leadership Academy for public servants sort of on the way to secretary level.
And how many other participants were there in that Leadership Academy?
Probably about 15.
Okay, so across the entire public service, there were 15 people who were identified as possible future secretaries, and you're amongst them?
Yes, correct.
Thanks very much, Ms West.
Just to be clear, there's roughly 200 people at level 3 across the public service, is that right?
I'm not sure of the actual number.
But it's fair to characterise it as not every level 3 DepSec gets this opportunity?
No, they do not.
And the people who are chosen for this program are chosen because, for want of a better term, it's worth the public investing in their skills so they could lead departments?
That is my understanding.
Did you have to apply for it, or were you invited to apply?
No, you have to get nominated my understanding is you have to get nominated by various people to be put on it. You don't apply.
Were you aware of who nominated you?
The Secretary of Treasury at that time, Michael Pratt, did.
So the then Secretary, were you aware that he was going to nominate you?
No, I was not.
So he ambushed you with a nomination for an Elite Leadership Academy, for which you were then successful?
No, so sorry. My understanding is on these Band 3 Leadership Academies, you need to get nominated by someone to go on it. I had a performance review with the Secretary Mr Pratt at the time, and it was a very good performance review. And at the end of the performance review, he told me that he had nominated me for the Band 3 Leadership Academy.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. And did you went on the academy?
Yes, I went on the academy.
How long was the academy? What is the academy?
It was over a number of months and a number of weeks, and it was with other DepSecs from various departments across New South Wales Government.
When did it finish?
It finished after I was made redundant. I didn't get to graduate.
Right. Okay. So did you get the opportunity to do most of the program?
Sorry?
Did you get the chance to do most of the program?
Yes, I did. I got to do 3/4 of the program. I thought it was very good.
But you didn't get a chance to graduate because you were made redundant?
Correct.
Just on the Coutts-Trotter email, you sent this email on the 11th of October. I think you've already said you didn't hear back from Mr Coutts-Trotter?
Yes, correct.
And is it your understanding that Mr Coutts-Trotter then referred this back to Investment New South Wales for a response?
I was not aware of that. I just hadn't heard back. And then subsequently, through the media, I heard that he'd referred this back to Investment New South Wales, but I had no knowledge of that.
Okay. Can I take you to the letter that he sends you on the 19th of November, which is, I think, your notification letter about your redundancy? To be clear here, Mr Coutts-Trotter seems to be following the standard process. Is that your understanding as to what he was doing when it comes to Section 41 terminations?
Yes, that is my understanding.
We've previously inquired into other people who've been through Section 41 appointments, and it looks like that's what he's doing. He says, I refer to previous correspondence concerning my intention to terminate your employment, in the first paragraph. You see that?
Yes.
I presume that is the letter of warning or the notification?
Yes, it is. That was all it was.
Yep, and it was presumably given to you, 7 days prior?
It was, on the 19th of November, I received the letter terminating my appointment effective the 30th.
Yep.
And I would have to take on notice the exact date of the prior.
But it was thereabouts or close
It was
to.
thereabouts.
And presumably, which is the standard procedure, is you're given the opportunity to make a submission to... Well, sorry, let me ask you, were you given an opportunity to make a submission to Mr Coutts-Trotter prior to him issuing you this letter?
No.
Okay. So he provided you a notification that he was considering a redundancy, and then thereafter you weren't invited to make a submission, and then you provided this letter.
I'd have to take that detail on notice. I don't have it in front of me.
But to be clear here, at no point did you ever speak with Mr Coutts-Trotter?
No, I did not.
At any point did you speak to anybody else in DPC who wasn't in Investment New South Wales?
No, I did not.
Did you have any engagement with the HR team at DPC?
No, I did not.
Okay. No one sought to meet with you, sought to have a conversation with you?
No, they did not.
Right. And inside Investment New South Wales, were you given the opportunity to have any meeting with their HR teams?
No, I was not.
So basically, you just get sent a letter?
Yes, correct.
Whilst you're in the middle of a leadership academy?
Yes, correct.
And sorry, how was the letter sent to you?
It was sent via my lawyers.
Emailed?
Emailed to my lawyers, and then they emailed it to me.
Okay.
At this point, your correspondence to Mr Coutts-Trotter from the 11th of October and your actions after that, were they intended to maintain your existing employment? Was that your motivation?
Yes, it was. I would have loved to have stayed in the public service. I felt that there was a lot more that I could add in terms of my skills.
So at this point, you aren't negotiating over the terms of any separation. You are trying to convince the public service to continue to employ you.
Yes, that was the intention of my 15-minute discussion with Mr Michael Coutts-Trotter. I did have concerns over the prior process, but I'd accepted that it was a parliamentary appointment versus a public sector appointment. I'd accepted that, but I did want to stay in my current role because I felt that I had a lot more to offer, and I was quite passionate about some of those key projects that I was working on that I wanted to make a difference.
Can I just take you very briefly back to that question about whether a successful candidate was identified? Given that the briefing note from to the Premier indicates in 5 different places that there is a successful candidate and names you as the successful candidate. We'll obviously take that up elsewhere. But were you ever in any doubt?
No, I
that
wasn't.
You were the successful
my understanding
candidate?
was that I was the successful candidate, and my understanding was that I had been fully offered the job, and I'd been negotiated my contract. I'd been discussing. I was literally waiting for me to sign the contract, and my understanding was that all the ministers' officers were across it, had been briefed, and I was ready to go.
And that's plainly what this briefing note says. I'd just simply then want to offer you the chance to respond to the suggestion that's been made in any way you choose to, that in fact there was no successful candidate identified for this role.
I would disagree with that. I would say I was the successful candidate identified for the role at the time.
Thank you.
Ms West, in the process of applying for the job that you were then recommended for and received an offer for, did you go through a criminal history check?
Yes, yes, I did.
Did it identify any issues?
No, and I'm also at a federal government level. I've been NV2 cleared, so I've been security clearance cleared at a federal government level as well.
Did you go through a media check?
A media check?
Yep.
As part of, I assume so, that as part of the vetting process.
And no issues were identified with you?
No.
Was NGS Global, did they undertake an education verification check?
Yes, my understanding is that they do proper external vetting of everyone's credentials, everyone's degrees, everyone's referees, everything.
They raised no issues with you?
They raised absolutely no issues with me whatsoever.
And is it the case that you also were subjected to an ASIC banned and disqualified search, an
Yes,
ASIC
correct.
enforceable undertakings register search,
Yes.
an Australian Financial Security Authority National Personal Insolvency Index search?
Yes.
You were subject to psychometric testing?
Yep.
So you went through 7 separate checks, did you not?
That is my understanding as part of the process.
And at no point did anybody raise any concerns with you?
No, they did not.
And that's in part, no records were ever reported to the selection panel, which is part of the reasons why you understand you were offered the role?
Yes.
Ms West, since this matter has come to light, have various journalists tried to contact you?
Yes, they have.
Have you had questions put to you via them that would lead you to conclude that your education was being challenged?
I have not spoken to any journalists whatsoever.
Have you been asked to respond to claims?
No, I have not.
What about in respect to your CV?
No, I have not.
Okay. Do you think that, just going back to the original, the investigation that took place into the matters that were subject to 7 separate checks, I just want to be abundantly clear here, at no point you were told that you were being subjected to an additional levels of checks after you were notified?
No, I was not.
At any point in that process, was any reference made to it in the decision to terminate your position?
No, it was not.
In any conversation whatsoever, when redundancy was canvassed with you, did anybody suggest that there was an issue with your performance?
No, it was not. I was told it was because it was moving from a public sector appointment to a political appointment, and that my salary would be used elsewhere.
And just to be very clear here, you were formally terminated, according to Mr Coote's Trotter's letter, under section 41(3) of the Act, which is a no-cause termination.
Correct.
And had you not been terminated, but otherwise would have been terminated for cause, is it your understanding that you wouldn't have been entitled to the statutory entitlement?
I'm not sure on that. I'd have to...
Sure. Yep.
Okay, does the government have any more questions?
Well, I've only got one more, but that's...
Okay, and is that it for the opposition?
I'll just double check
Okay,
whilst the
all right.
government is
I think
asking.
we might may have an early minute, Ms West.
You Chair?
We'll go straight to you, Mr Fang.
Thank you. Ms West, given that you've been through the recruiting process for the Sticks role, would you concur that a candidate such as the Deputy Premier, as the former Minister for Trade, understanding that he has for New South Wales and also the experience in government, would likely mean that had somebody with similar experience been a candidate, that they would have been ideal for the role?
I can't comment on that. That would be a question for Ms Brown or in the committee.
Do you agree at all that it would make reasonable sense to have a former Trade Minister in that role?
I can't comment on that. That would be a question for Ms Brown and the committee.
Fair enough.
Okay, all right. So we'll just
Just a
not
few
the whole
more-
time, Mr. Mookie.
Sure. I just want to take aspects of, just to cover this off, Ms West, more than anything else. You outlined at opening instance your qualifications for the role.
Yeah.
Just to be clear here, you were working in the New South Wales Treasury before you were working for Investment New South Wales?
Yes, correct.
What were you doing at the Treasury?
I was working in my Deputy Secretary Trade and International role for 6 months in New South Wales Treasury before Investment New South Wales was created.
And at that point, you were directly reporting to the Secretary of the Treasury?
Sorry?
For that 6-month period, you were reporting directly to the Secretary of the Treasury?
Yes, I was correct.
Yes. And just to be clear here, at that point in time, the Treasury was responsible for the development of the Global New South Wales Strategy?
Yes, correct.
And you were leading that work? Or part of that?
I was part of that.
But you were a very senior leader in that project, correct?
Yes, I was.
And and how long had you been with Treasury for?
I was with Treasury for 6 months prior to Investment New South Wales being created.
Yeah. And were you at all informed at Treasury that Investment New South Wales was going to be created?
And no, I was not.
Yeah. And look, we've had it established in estimates hearings previously that nor was the rest of the Treasury. In fact, I think the transfer took place after the announcement. Is that your understanding too? Of personnel?
That is my understanding.
So you switched from Treasury to Investment New South Wales as a result of the decision to form Investment New South Wales, is that correct?
Correct.
And the reason why you carried over as a Deputy Secretary from Treasury to Investment New South Wales was because in part you were performing the job already?
Yes, I was.
But then you were then subjected to another check through Investment New South Wales to get the job permanently?
No, so I went through all of the detailed interviews, psychometric testing, job applications to get into the Deputy Secretary Trade and International role in New South Wales Treasury.
Yeah.
And then I had to go through the same process when I applied for the Stick Americas role.
Yeah.
But I went across from Treasury into Investment New South Wales, and then I was confirmed as part of the leadership team by Amy Brown and went through leadership team building sessions with her finalised leadership team as well at the time.
You hold a Masters of Business in International Marketing?
Yes, correct.
Do you hold a Bachelor of Economics?
Yes, I do.
Were you told at all points that it was an essential requirement for the Americas role that you have tertiary education qualifications? That was
I'd have to go back to the original job description, but I think that in the
candidate
packs that it did say tertiary qualifications, but I would have to go back and check and take that on notice.
That's okay, Ms West. We have the document. It says they're quite essential. It was an essential requirement, but that's your understanding too.
Yes, it was.
And you were a Westpac Woman of Influence
Yes,
correct. Award winner?
Yes.
How does one become a Westpac Woman of Influence?
That was an internal Westpac Women of Influence award, and at the time it was Phil Coffey gave me that award, and it was for business outcomes and talent development across all of Westpac.
He was the CEO of Westpac at the time? CFO of Westpac at the time.
Yeah.
And can I also just go through, you were were you a governor of the American Chamber of Commerce?
Yes, I was.
How long were you a governor of the American Chamber of Commerce?
I was a governor for 2 years, and that finished up at the end of May 2022.
How does one become a governor of the American Chamber of Commerce?
I was working very closely with the American Chamber of Commerce in my prior role in Austrade, and I'd had numerous conversations with them around trade and investment opportunities across the America, and so I was invited to become a New South Wales governor.
You were invited to become a governor on the American Chamber of Commerce board?
Yes, correct.
What, by the chairperson? Or
the CEO.
Right. And equally, you're a member of the Australia-India Business Council, which is an organisation Mr Farr and I know quite well. You are?
Yes.
And you're a member of the Australia-China Business Council?
Yeah, I was, yes.
And you're a member of Women in Global Business Network?
Yes.
And you would have considered these to be key requirements that would have assisted you to do the role in the Americas?
Yeah, I think it's very important to have diverse cultural relationships around the world, so I have a great interest in global issues and cultural issues, which is why I was a member of those organisations.
Okay, and previously as well you'd worked at Austrade?
Yes, I did.
And what did you do there?
I was the General Manager for Trade and Investment across Australia, and I also, towards the end, was doing digital innovation and client services across the organisation. So my role there was at the same level as the regional roles internationally as well.
Chair, can I just, at this juncture, note that we didn't use all our time, and I was just seeking some advice. I have.
If you have a few more questions, Mr. Fang, feel free to the government. I can give the government the last 5 minutes after Mr. Mookie just finishes his question. Okay. Is that what you're after? Just to,
yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. Also wanted
That's
to
fine. I knew you were looking at me. That's fine, Mr. Mookie.
Sure. So, Ms. West, you were substantially performing a similar role at Austrade. Is that what you were saying?
Yes, I ran the trade and investment teams across Australia.
And you apparently, did you facilitate over $8 billion in productive foreign direct investment over your period of time there?
In conjunction with the team around the world, correct.
So, and these are all the qualities that you nominated for why you thought you would be an appropriate candidate?
Yes, I felt that my background across both government and multiple industries over my career, I could help New South Wales and use those skills to help the businesses and people of New South Wales globally.
Just to be clear here, you were questioned about these experiences by the selection panel?
Yes, I was.
And you were asked to describe certain situations that you would have encountered in performing these roles?
Yes,
like
I was.
How to undertake complex negotiations?
Yes, correct.
And did you leave with the impression that your answers were satisfactory?
Yes, I did.
Do you maintain your view now that you are still qualified, or you would have been qualified to perform this role?
Yes, I do.
Were you ever told when the role was meant to commence?
My understanding was it was around sort of, I'd have to check, but it was sort of around October timing.
Yeah, we've seen emails which suggested that the role was to commence around October, but you were working, part of the reasons why you were sourcing an apartment, finding appropriate schooling for your children or dependents, was because you were under the impression that you'd have to move to New York within a month.
I was under the impression that I would have to move quickly and that I had to get my affairs in order quickly.
Okay, Mr. Mookie. Mr. Fang.
Thank you, Chair. And just before I start the next line of questioning, I just wanted to draw to other members' attention that pages 8 to 10 and 811 of Lovelock and Evans, second edition, states that legal professional privilege is not applicable to committee hearings, and it includes advice from Mr. Brett Walker. So with that in mind, Chair, I'm going to ask Ms. West now some of the questions that I asked previously.
I'm going to take a point of order. I'm sorry. I'm just going to take a point of order. I'm just going to take, Chair, I'm going to take a point of order.
Take a point of order.
In respect to just simply reading out a reference from Lovelock and Evans does not give the member the prerogative to just pursue questions. Now, if the member wants to go point by point about what the appropriate use of legal professional privilege is in the committee setting, we're happy to do that. But to be very clear here, there are multiple precedents and multiple rulings, often insisted by government members, that we do respect legal professional privilege, especially because the witness is not appearing here under subpoena. There is a distinction to be drawn. Given the witness has not been subpoenaed and therefore does not have the protection of a subpoena, it would be highly inappropriate for us to allow the member to continue. The witness has appeared here voluntarily.
My time
and I would just suggest that the witness wasn't even provided notice that she may well be invited to take questions on legal professional privilege, for which I imagine she would have insisted that she does appear here under privilege, so she got protection in those proceedings. The fact is that any matter that canvasses the law is not protected and can be used against this witness in any other court proceeding. It would be highly outrageous for us to put the witness in that position.
Thank you, Mr. Mookie. So
Point of order.
Point of order.
we'll go Mr.
I was first.
Okay, Mr. Bulzer.
I'd just like to remind the witness, in light of what Mr. Mookie was saying, which I obviously echo, is that it's purely up to you as to whether you want to answer any of these questions or not. You're not compelled to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bulzer. Mr. Farlow.
If I could just suggest that potentially, rather than relying on the assertions of Mr. Fang or Mr. Mookie with respect to this regard, if we could go into a closed session of the committee and get the advice of the committee secretariat on this matter.
I'm happy. I'm happy in this regard that I can put the questions perhaps.
Can I put the point of order? If the government wishes to recall the witness under subpoena, so at least the witness has the ability to go to any other court proceeding and say that they cannot use it against her, that's one option that's available to the government. But they cannot turn up 3 minutes before a hearing and try to ambush a witness of any type in a manner that the Deputy President is currently proposing to do.
Can I say that and rule that I uphold the point of order by Mr Mookie and was convinced by his argument? Mr Fang, we've got just under 2 minutes left. If you wish to ask the witness different questions, please proceed. And if you're finished with questions, that's the end of today's hearing.
I will take advice from the clerks and I can put any questions that I have as supplementaries.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Ms West. That is the end of today's hearing. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
You did take questions on notice, and the Secretariat will be in touch with those, in touch with you about those, and you'll have 21 days to get those back to the committee. So thank you again. I really appreciate, as all members do, you giving us your time today and appearing before this committee. Thank you.
Thank you.